Oh. Hello, fellow film fans. Today I'll be reviewing the theatrical release of Anora, which came out last week and is still playing in theaters. As usual, my reviews have spoilers, so viewer beware. Anora begins as a well-observed portrait of a young stripper's life and work in Brooklyn, then takes us on some wild twists and turns before its inevitable ending, somehow without feeling predictable. The film stars Mikey Madison as the titular character, though she goes by Annie. She's headstrong and bright, but not above being caught up in a fairy tale illusion of wealth and luxury. Her main gig is as a stripper, but she's willing to do just about anything in that realm if the price is right. We find this out early on after she's summoned by the club to tend to a customer with a special request. A young man with a bottomless well of money wants a girl who speaks Russian. She coaxes him to a VIP room and is not doing lap dances for long before he's offering to pay her for outside services. From the outset, Anora oozes authenticity. These early scenes in the strip club are loud and fast-paced, but still show enough behind the scenes to be fascinating. The performers are definitely at a job, but still have their alliances and rivals. The owner goes against stereotype by not being a sleazy jerk. The floor manager is harsh but fair. What works best is that director Sean Baker is not calling too much attention to this. It's just a byproduct while we're being introduced to Annie. This realism pervades the entire movie, whether it's in the back rooms of restaurants and shops or when we're seeing the machinations of arriving at a small airport from overseas in a private jet. Baker makes every character, place, and scene seem real. Ivan, played by Mark Eidelstein, is spoiled by parents we haven't met to a degree that would be foreign to most people. He apparently has no skills or talents, which is convenient for him since he also has no ambition to do anything but play video games, smoke weed, and party, not necessarily in that order. With Annie's help, he can add one more mindlessly performed indulgence to that list. One thing leads to another, and in short order, Annie finds herself under exclusive contract to Ivan for a week at his waterside mansion in Brighton Beach, where he seemingly lives alone aside from the security and cleaning crews who tend to him. Annie's routine here consists of getting undressed, screwing, getting dressed again, and watching Ivan play video games. At this point, Anora feels like it's going to follow a predictable trajectory. Maybe Ivan will show his true colors, maybe he'll become controlling or abusive, but Baker has other things in mind, starting with three-dimensional characters at every turn with their accompanying human choices and foibles that complicate things. Ivan's not at all deep, but he is fun and disarmingly charming. This is key to Anora being successful, especially in the early passages when the movie is trying to seduce us into coming along for the ride. Annie seems into him enough, but we're never sure whether she's enamored with him or his lifestyle. And Baker has enough respect for the audience to not answer that question directly. She's a pro, so she masks her motivations well, but she is working for tips. Either way, it's certainly a nice change of pace for her, from cold subway rides in the middle of the night to a small apartment with a pestering roommate who wakes her up to ask dumb questions. For all we know, Annie isn't sure of her feelings either. Most people in her shoes might not be. Meanwhile, Ivan has more partying to do. The New Year's Eve bash he throws isn't enough, so he takes her to Vegas on a private jet. It's here where we see perhaps the first break in his veneer when he throws a pretend fit about having to wait for his penthouse suite in Vegas while the hotel staff cleans up after the people they booted to make room for him. The joke comes so naturally to him that we can't help but assume he's drawing on past experiences. And of course, it isn't all that funny to the person at the ass end of it. As the week in the Vegas trip in particular progresses, they seem to grow more fond of each other, even though his affinity for her may not extend past the erotic fulfillment she provides at whatever given moment until he can go back to his video games. Sex with him is fast, robotic, and meaningless. At one point, Annie tells him if he slows down, it'll last longer and feel better. She takes over and shows him in one of the hotter movie scenes I can remember, and his mind is blown. Perhaps not coincidentally, they're engaging in pillow talk shortly thereafter, and he makes another possible joke, this one about marrying her, right there in Vegas. He'll become an American citizen and won't have to answer to his parents anymore, though he never wonders if the cash flow will dry up, and she won't have to do anything at all again except keep providing her a unique source of entertainment. For a price. The ring's got to be at least 4 carats. Soon enough, they're married and back in Brighton Beach, and here is where the fairy tale comes to an end. We're introduced to Toros, an Armenian priest who's also Ivan's handler of sorts. He reassures Ivan's family that Ivan's not married and it's just a rumor, then sends 2 henchmen to the house to check on him. Annoyed that they've interrupted one of his jackrabbit sessions, Ivan, standing at full attention, refuses to open the door, but of course they have access anyway and let themselves in. After a brief struggle, Ivan finally reveals most of his darker side and runs away, leaving Annie at the house with the 2 presumed thugs. She's trying to run after Ivan, they're trying to restrain her, and she's fighting back hard. Eventually, one of them ties her hands behind her back and holds her until Toros shows up, while the other tends to the broken nose Annie gave him. If what we've seen to this point amounts to a long first act, the second consists of the 3 apparent goons and Annie driving around Coney Island and Brighton Beach looking for Ivan in order to get their marriage annulled, all at the behest of Ivan's parents. Much of this becomes almost screwball with plenty of laugh-out-loud moments. One of the best sequences, not just because it's funny, but more because it shows the human side of Annie's co-workers at the club, is when the crew tracks Ivan back to the club and goes door to door through the VIP section looking for him. The patrons are horrified, jumping up and pulling up their pants as quickly as possible, while the girls are unperturbed. Annie might as well have been walking past a row of office cubicles saying "Happy Monday" to them. These middle passages are also where the depth of the characters starts to reveal itself. Toros has an air of desperation around everything he does to find Ivan. It's not because he cares for him, on the contrary, he's bailed him out of too many jams to count, but because he's practically an indentured servant to Ivan's parents. Baker never reveals the extent or details of their arrangement, but shows enough with Toros' actions. In the middle of a baptism, he feels his phone vibrating in his pocket, takes it out and looks with one hand, while on the other he's holding the baby he's baptizing. He haphazardly gives the baby back to the shocked mother when he finds out he has to deal with another, bigger baby, then bounces from the baptism mid-service. Annie is referred to several times as a hooker or escort or call girl, and she takes great offense, but she shouldn't. She's not the only one here who's hitched their wagon to wealth and will do anything to maintain that connection. Vashi Tovmazian as Garnick is despondent over his broken nose. He eventually takes pain medication and spends much of the night trying to stay conscious and keep his stomach down. But the best, most surprising character is the other henchman, Igor, played by Yura Borisov. He's quietly menacing and seems like the type who would do anything for his bosses without thinking twice. On the way to the house, he has to promise Garnick that he won't get physical with Ivan, which adds to the dread later on when he's tussling with Annie that things might turn horrifically violent. But as the search for Ivan drags on and Annie slowly comes to terms with the reality of the situation and where this is seemingly headed, Igor starts to feel sympathy for her, which manifests in subtle glances and gestures, like giving her a much-needed shot of vodka. By the time Ivan's parents arrive and fix things, Igor turns out to be the kindest person of the lot. The final scenes are between him and Annie and are the best, most touching, and ultimately devastating scenes in the movie. Ivan, on the other hand, scuttles back to Russia with his parents without even a glancing thought of what he's done to Annie, who now has to grovel back to her old life, her old apartment, her old job. His lack of awareness, much less remorse for what he's put her through, is pathological. She was never a person to him. If he was kind to her, it's because he'd be just as kind to his bong or PlayStation remote. It turns out this whole extravaganza was nothing more than an extended one last hurrah before going back to Russia, and disappearing for the night was just him acting out, as if he were 7 years old, had tanked the pool by pouring gallons of Kool-Aid into it, and was hiding from his parents under his bed to postpone whatever punishment they weren't going to hand down anyway. All with a slight giggle, of course. Mikey Madison has gotten rave reviews for her performance, and it's well deserved. I'd only seen her in a handful of pictures, and I wasn't impressed, especially with her over-the-top turn in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So I was dubious that she'd be able to carry an entire movie, but she does here in what seems like a difficult, literally bare-all role, shifting between eroticism, intelligence, comedy, and raw emotion. My only critique would be that Annie gets lost in the shuffle during the middle sequences when they're searching for Ivan. But the film is so entertaining and she and the other characters are so well-rounded that it never becomes a problem. Anora is from Neon, which has brought us some of the best movies in recent years, including The Worst Person in the World, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Triangle of Sadness, Anatomy of a Fall, one of the best of this century, Parasite, and many, many other certified bangers. You can add this one to that list. I give it a 10 out of 10, and it's probably the best picture I've seen this year. If you like this video, please feel free to give it a like. If you enjoy my channel's content, please feel free to subscribe. If you want to start a conversation, feel free to drop a comment and I'll try to respond to everybody. Otherwise, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.